Greetings again, everyone. I just wanted to kind of jump in here and explain a couple of things that I basically completely forgot the other day when I did the last lecture. So this is still going to be about Chapter 3, so you can kind of tie this in with that last video, if you will. I'm just not going to re-edit it. It takes forever, and I'm not good with that software stuff. Anyway, so I wanted to talk a couple of things about, number one, again, reinforcement. I want to add a little bit to those the motivating operations, just kind of bring you back into thinking about that. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about, what do you say that here? I'm going to flip to the book here. Reinforcer immediacy. I'm not going to get into the direct effect and the indirect effect stuff, though that's well explained in your book. I do want to talk just briefly about contingent versus non-contingent reinforcement, what the differences are there. The transitions to the natural environment are pretty straightforward. I'm just finishing up the last of the chapter here. You can hear the book flipping in the background. And then the other thing was actually Premack principle, which I'm going to kind of jump into first, really, before we actually, wait a minute. Whatever. We'll just jump into it right now, and we'll go from there. So, motivating operations, again, we're talking about two different categories there. We've got the establishing operations and the abolishing operations. The easy way to think about the establishing operations is that if I deprive you of something that you like, that thing is now going to be more valuable. Okay, and if I satiate you on something that you don't like, or even something that you do like, if you're satiated with something, then it's going to be less valuable. So when we're thinking about establishing the effectiveness of a reinforcer, again through this motivating operation stuff, then we're talking about either depriving or satiating. That's the easiest way to think of it, really. So this becomes a real issue with self-management, as you might imagine, because I'm going to ask you to manage your own behavior. That means you're going to have to reinforce your own behavior. In order to do that, you're going to have to withhold access to reinforcers, things you might typically enjoy doing or getting or something like that. And that in itself is a challenge. It's kind of the problem with self-management in a nutshell, right? So you do the things that you shouldn't do, but you enjoy doing. You drink too much, you eat too much, you smoke too much, whatever it is, right? So what you need to do is actually withhold access to those things so then they can become reinforcers for desirable behavior or something like that. We'll talk more about that in the discussions in the course, but basically that's what we're talking about with motivating operations. So the other thing I wanted to really hit on here was, the Premack principle. Premack, really cool, all right? But this gets back to another type of thing, like what is a reinforcer, right? So I talk about it, your book talks about it typically as a stimulus, but it doesn't have to be thought of as just a stimulus, right? A reinforcer, according to Premack, is an activity, okay? Let that think about that for a minute. The reinforcer is actually an activity. Any stimulus that you get that is a reinforcer typically involves an activity. Think about those manipulative things, right? So those manipulative reinforcers, if you're playing with something, I play with these little, these clips all the time, right? So sure, this clip is maybe a reinforcer, but it's not the clip itself that's a reinforcer. It's the activity of playing with it, right? He basically said that was the case for any reinforcer. So including food reinforcers, the activity is, as you might guess it, eating or drinking, if you will. Okay, as I lose my coffee here, get my reinforcer, my coffee reinforcer, which is actually me drinking coffee, right? So Premack then explored this idea of activity-based reinforcement. Right? And what he found is something really simple, that, that low probability behavior can be reinforced with high probability behavior. So in other words, if you're, think of the things that you might like to do, okay? Those things are high probability behavior. In other words, if given a chance, you would engage in that behavior. There's a high probability of you doing that. Low probability behavior is stuff like, homework, stuff that you wouldn't necessarily normally like doing, housework, homework, those types of things. That's low probability behavior. So with kids, we think chores, right? So also think about how we could use that then. So you think about low probability can be reinforced with high probability. So in other words, if you do something that maybe a chore or something, then I can reinforce you by allowing you access to something you like to do. Right? The trick with it is to be able to manage the access to the behavior. Right? Works great in the classroom. okay at home, but if you're not able to manage somebody's environment in terms of controlling their daily activities, you'll never be able to pull off the Premack principle. Okay? But it is very useful. I've used it myself. One of the things during graduate school, I had a stack of things I had to read for it's called prelims. Some programs call them comps. The basic idea is I had about 4,000 pages at least worth of reading to do on these various topics. So you had several topics, and one of those things I chose was the philosophy of behavior analysis, and then also applied behavior analysis specifically. So I had tons and tons of reading, stacks and stacks and stacks of journal articles, all the books, basically exhaustive information on those topics. Right? So I'm not a fast reader at all. It's just me. I talk fast, but I don't read fast. Right? So I found myself, it was very difficult to work on that material. And you got several, you got a year and a half to complete those exams, right? So to study for them so you can sit down and take them. So the trick was, how do you manage your behavior? Or how did I manage my own behavior? How could I do that? That's what I was thinking about during studying, to actually be on track, to keep studying and keep studying and keep studying and and be successful at the end of 1 year to take those prelims. And what I found out was that at the time I was working on restoring an old 1959 Chev. Right? Okay, I'm back. Again, I was working on a 1959 Chev like that, the picture that you just saw somewhere in here, and I was restoring that thing, and the basic idea was that if given an opportunity, I would rather much be out there grinding, much prefer to be out there grinding or welding or sanding or doing whatever on the truck than actually engaging in studying behavior. So to manage my own behavior, straightforward, study for 1 hour, 10 minutes access of work to the truck. Now, there's not much work you can do on restoring in 10 minutes, but the idea was that it worked. Right? I was able to maintain my reading behavior, and I slowly made it bigger and bigger. So I would be like, okay, now I got to do 2 hours of studying in order for 20 minutes of access to the truck, and then 3 hours of studying for 30 minutes, and so on and so forth. And I built that up to where every 3 hours, it kind of stopped at 3 hours, because at 3 hours I was pretty burned out. So every 3 hours I would take a break and then go and work on the truck for 30 minutes. And the cool thing was, it took about a year, and I got through the prelims, and I got most of the truck done. So it worked out great. But the high probability behavior, it seems to me like it reinforced the low probability behavior. The other side of this coin is about those prelims, is I was reading stuff that was interesting, so maybe it was also reinforcing it into itself. At least it seemed like it to me, so I think it was. So that's that one. So very useful, absolutely cool technique. Reinforcer immediacy, kind of the next topic here. I'm flipping on to page 42. Basically, the quicker you can deliver a reinforcer, the more effective it is. It's just less confusing for the person. There's not much more to it than that, really. We talk, the book talks about direct effects and indirect effects, the strengthening of the response and so on and so forth. But yeah, that's getting very technical, and that's fine. That's the type of stuff I'll ask you about on the test. But basically, the quicker you can reinforce, the better. If there is a long delay to reinforcement, you need something to hold the place of that. And we're going to talk about that placeholder when we get into that next chapter. And that next chapter will cover that placeholder, which is, in a sense, a condition reinforcer. And sometimes, as I talked about in the previous video, it's just words or a token or something like that can delay you until you get to your actual reinforcement. But ultimately, the most effective way to reinforce somebody is deliver a reinforcer as quickly as possible. So the moment the behavior happens, deliver a reinforcer. When we work with dogs and cats and things like that, or whatever, dolphins, as the book talks about, we use the clickers, right, as condition reinforcers, and those clickers, they deliver reinforcers immediately, and that's why they're so powerful. And I don't want to give my lecture away too much here, but we'll talk more about that later in the next unit. So, contingent, non-contingent reinforcement. Contingent is that's really the key to real reinforcement, that you have to do the behavior in order to earn the reinforcer. Right? For me, non-contingent reinforcer is just a stimulus that's presented to somebody, and it has nothing to do with whatever behavior they're doing. In fact, it's not even. I hate even calling it reinforcement, because really the definition of reinforcement means contingent, the contingent application or removal of a stimulus following a behavior, so the behavior has to happen first. Non-contingent is basically, it's like reward. All right, so you can, in fact, that's a good way to think of it, is that non-contingent reinforcement, in quotes there, is actually just reward. Will it affect behavior? Maybe, maybe not. Right? Will you develop superstitious behavior as a result? You definitely could. So that might be what's going on with non-contingent stuff. Again, you can read more about it in your book, but for the purposes of behavior analysis in this course, you really, really want to be focusing on contingent applications. All right, and you know that. Not much more to say about it, really. That's just contingency is the key. You have to perform that behavior, and then you reinforce it. Dropping these little stimuli that we call reinforcers randomly throughout somebody's life, there's some interesting effects, right? Like I hinted at, that one of those things is superstition, and Skinner used non-contingent reinforcement to develop superstitions in pigeons, and there's some questions as to whether or not what actually happened, but it boils down to the fact that really weird behavior got selected for. And I suppose that happens in our daily life, so maybe that's something to think about, is think of some examples for when that occurs. Oh, let's see. Anything else in here that we need to talk about before we move on and I post up the next lecture? Nope, that's about it. Okay, enjoy it. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.